over for Amir's slide deck, and I'm going to introduce Amir Hartman, who joined us in our last meeting and has been very helpful for helping us understand a bit about where AI is and where AI is and where AI is going. So Amir is the managing director, and he leads the AI digital strategy practice at Distill Consulting. He's also the AI strategy research director for the Experience Alliance and Fideri AI. He works with senior business and technology leaders to develop and implement AI and digital strategies that maximize the full potential of their most valuable assets, their customers. Before joining Distill, Amir was a managing director of customer success at Oracle, where he worked with customer executives to build their digital strategies. And prior to Oracle, he co-founded and served as the managing director of Mainstay Company, a B2B digital strategy advisory firm, dedicated to engineering customer outcomes from technology investments and enhancing the sales, marketing, and customer success processes of some of the world's best technology companies. Amir is the best-selling author for works like Net Ready, back in the days when we were just getting ready for the internet, competing for customers, and his new book will be coming out called AI Ready in 2024. Beyond writing, Amir has contributed to education and research, teaching at MBA and executive MBA programs at Berkeley's School of Business and Harvard's Business School, and a focus on internet business strategy and digital transformation. We're really grateful to have you back with us, Amir, and we're excited to hear what you have to tell us today.
Okay. All right, thank you guys. Yeah, it's definitely been a long time, right? We've been working together for 25 years, and an uncanny how similar it is to the mid-90s in terms of what's going on. You're seeing a lot of hype around AI, obviously. Everybody's super excited. Startups are getting funded right and left. So I want to share with you what I am finding from established companies who are using and employing and deploying AI, what they're seeing, what's working, what's not, where they're getting hung up. I wanted to be interactive. So if you got questions, please chime in, stop me. I'm going to go through a few of the slides a little bit quicker because I want us to have a good, robust discussion, and we have an hour. So let's get started with the first slide. So which one is the?
Yep, to the right.
Yep, I'm pressing the right.
Make sure you're clicked into the actual slide deck. Are we here? Let's see if you can make it right.
Okay, there we go. All right, so point is, I'm not going to go through all these stats, but sentiment is very, very high, obviously. You can see some of these stats in terms of how much money companies are, and these are B2B companies, investing in AI. And so it is obviously, companies are very excited. Leaders truly believe they can transform their organization through AI in the next few years. So that, I just want to establish that fact. Okay, you're saying it's not necessarily a claim for every organization. Obviously, certain industries are a little bit ahead of the game, leaning in quicker, but sentiment is very, very high. And I do think there are, even though, let's get something established. Obviously, AI is nothing new. AI has been around for decades. The issue is the past few years, a few things are very new, which are very significant. I want to call them out. First one is that the cost to compute is close to zero today. It used to be that we could do the same activities that these large language models could do, like ChatGPT, but it would take years and years to do that. Now, with the advent of some of the, whether it's NVIDIA, whether it's storage, the cost of computing has gone down to almost zero. So that's number one. That's one fact. Data is also exploding, whether you're getting from IoT, which is the Internet of Things because of sensors and smart products, to things like digital twins, where you can take a factory floor, for example, digitize it, run simulated and synthesized data through the factory floor, and start looking at how it's performing. Can we move things around? That is also exploding. And I'll talk a little bit about digital twins. Who knows what the term agentic AI means? Show of hands. Agentic AI. You do, because we had a one-on-one. Okay, so agentic AI. Let's take this. We've all heard the stories And we even heard, I think it was yesterday, about writing a paper using, let's say, ChatGPT, for example. So imagine that scenario where you would write a paper. And you and I, let's say our colleague, we want to write a paper together and let's say post it on LinkedIn. So what we would do, let's say, you know what, I'm going to create an outline. We chose a topic. I'm going to create an outline, send it to you. I'll read it. Maybe I'll take the first draft, send it back, we'll go back and forth. Maybe we even send it once we've got a good draft, send it to Ralph just to get his eyes on it so he can review. They'll send it back to us. We incorporate those changes. We like it. And then we then say, let's go post it on LinkedIn. Agentic AI will literally do that workflow for you. And upon certain parameters, either autonomously or semi-autonomously, we'll post it on LinkedIn. So that's agentic AI. It has agency or some agency. That is happening right now as we speak in companies. Take, for example, the buying process, the purchasing process. You have AI agents that are looking for products that match certain criteria, and they're scouring online, looking whether it's textual data, audio data, visual data, simultaneously synthesizing it, and then making a decision to purchase or not purchase based on certain parameters. That's happening today. I'm not making it up. So the question for you as marketers, and this is a very, I think, very profound question, not only for marketers, but also academics, is this. If we have a world where AI agents exist in the buying process, do I need to rethink, not throw away, but rethink how I market, given that now AI agents are part of the buying journey? Or if I'm selling, what is my selling journey? And do I need to rethink and augment my selling journey to account for AI agents? So to me, if you're an academic, that's a fascinating area of study. Yeah.
Does that only happen with staple merchandises?
Is this only happening with what?
Staple merchandises.
No, not necessarily. But yes, you're right. For commodity ones, it certainly is easier. But we're starting to see more because of the next piece, which is the multimodal nature of AI, because you can now simultaneously take textual data, audio data, and visual data simultaneously. We're seeing products that are not just commodities, easy to explain, things of that nature, and price driven. Good question, though. And then lastly, so the multimodal we talked about, that's huge. That's very, very different. I mean, think of what we do. Think of SEO in an organization. Everybody does SEO for making sure that our product is positioned properly. That has to radically be rethought. Now we have to take, it's not just, and I think actually Google has a term for it. I believe it's called search generative experience. Search generative experience instead of SEO. It's for AI agents. Now, I'm not sure if that's something that's going to catch on and that's going to become the new SEO, but I think it's a worthwhile question to ask is, do I need to rethink how I market when one of my audiences is an AI agent? Because we've always made assumptions. And think of classic marketing frameworks, for example, product market fit, classic. The market, we have always assumed is a human being. Right, so now we need to kind of rethink that a little bit. All right, democratization of AI, that's happened when chat came on the scene. In November of 2022, many of us got floored. And AI was put in our own hands. That's the democratization of AI. And you're going to see it more and more because you're going to start seeing AI at the edge. At the edge means at the source of the data. So whether it's your iPhone will have AI and does have AI capabilities, or an HVAC system which emits, emits energy, or wind turbines, it will happen. AI is happening at the source of the data. So these are some things that are very, very notable, in my opinion, that are really changing the game. So show of hands, and these are very informal definitions. I've got a set of questions in my net readiness assessment tool, which is about 80 questions, to categorize where you stack up. But how would you, just by a show of hands, really quickly, just gut feel, will you read it? We have no knowledge, really no legitimate knowledge about AI or its potential. So we're sort of AI unaware. AI aware, we understand basically what AI can do, but we don't have a real strategy around it. And moving up the stack, obviously, you get more active. We've got active initiatives going on. We've got an AI strategy. Where would you rank yourself? Show of hands. How many would say, we're really AI unaware? Show of hands. Okay, good. That's not where you want to be, obviously. How would you say you're AI aware? We have a basic understanding of what it can do, but we really don't have a strategy. Okay, it looks like the majority of folks, and then anybody higher up the stack? Okay, and what do you guys, quickly, what do you do?
Well, I do two things. One is I do B2B consulting, but I also teach at Montana State University. So we have a strategy to incorporate it into our business classes.
Excellent.
Mainly to show the students what it can do and what it can't do. And hopefully my role is to tell them what it can't do.
Okay, good. That's great. Anybody else want to share?
Yeah, I'm at Human 8, so in market research and customer insight. And we use it for innovation. We use agents to do interviews. We do it for analysis. So
Excellent.
It's getting embedded into our processes.
Awesome. Yeah.
So I'm part of a group called Climate Technology Solutions. And one of the challenges we have is methane measurement and quantification, which is right now using spectral images and all. So there is could be a good use case of analyzing those images to quantify the methane, which is one of the more potential greenhouse gases, more higher global warming potential.
Absolutely.
Than CO2.
Yeah.
So that is one use case we are looking at, and we're working with some partners to deploy that.
Excellent. Yeah, obviously, one thing you'll notice in our talk today is there is not a paucity for use cases. Right? There is not a lack of ideas on how to employ AI in the enterprise, in the organization. The issue is quite the opposite, my data tells me. Companies are drowning with so many ideas on how to employ AI. It's dilutive. And I want to show you some stats. So, and that's not to say that AI is not, AI absolutely can help, right? Look at some of these stats in terms of, these are literally employees who are surveyed in terms of being able to finish more tasks in a particular time period, right? They can do it quicker. Here's another interesting finding. This was done, I think it was BCG consultants were given an AI, a large language model to play with. I think it was ChatGPT, but it could be Claude or any of those. They were asked to do a set of problems that typical consultants, strategy consultants do. So the top performing, so one group was sort of an A/B testing, right? One group was given ChatGPT, one group was not, but they were given the same problems to solve. The top 10%, the top 10 performers that were given the AI tools to solve the problems were at least, they were graded as 10% better quality. The bottom performers who were given the tool performed 40% better than the bottom performers who were not given the tool. Interesting insights there and how that could apply in organizations. Whoops. How do I get out of that? So there's three kinds of AI that we're seeing in the marketplace. I would bet any organization you're doing one of these three things. Thank you. Yep, perfect. So there's what I call shadow AI. AI that's unofficial, right? Unapproved in the organization, but is being used anyway. That's called shadow AI. Now I'll show you some stats about that. Then there's what I call embedded AI. where you've got your big vendors, technology vendors like an Oracle Financials or an SAP, for example, or Microsoft, and they're embedding AI capabilities into their financial software, for example, or supply chain software. That's embedded AI. And then you've got folks who are actively pursuing their own strategy, perhaps even using embedded AI or creating certain separate AI activities. Those are the three kinds of activities that are going on. This is very fascinating, right? So I did research recently, this is within the past couple of months, first piece of research showing 30% of companies have what I call shadow AI. And when I asked executives, and these were customer-facing executives, they said they believe 30% of them believe that they have shadow AI activity going on. When you ask employees, this is a LinkedIn survey that was done a couple of months ago. LinkedIn survey asked employees who's bringing their own, BYOB, right? Who's bringing their own AI to work, right? Almost 80% of people said they're bringing their own AI to work. Now, whether you buy my stat, which is more conservative, and I think it's low, or you very high LinkedIn stat, it's a problem, right, that we need to address. Not that your people are intentionally doing bad things, they're not, but there are risks involved. And so getting ahead of the game and understanding and saying, how do I balance between encouraging innovation and encouraging learning, which is a big issue, and encouraging experimentation versus the risk. Do I want to risk bringing in their own AI, or can I provide them AI within certain parameters so that they can learn? So that's a delicate balancing act that you have to figure out as a leader. How many of you guys, if I ask you the question, how many do you guys think shadow AI exists in your organizations? Show of hands.
It's 100%. Why is it only 78?
Yeah, I know. Okay. Yeah, so again, as a leader, it's something to think about and not shy away from. This is the reality. And the question is, what do you do as a leader? Yes.
I have a question. So I've been trying to come up with a good analogy. Maybe you can help me define this. How do we deal with AI? Right? And what I'm trying to, I used to say the fax machine, but now no one likes that analogy anymore. But it's kind of like when Google first came out. It's the analogy I'm using. Google wasn't licensed, people would use it on their computer, and they find all sorts of stuff. Sometimes they found a bunch of crap, right? But sometimes they find some really good stuff. So as they found really good stuff, people got better at search terms, right? So that's what the learning curve was for everyone to get better at search terms. Is that a good analogy for AI, that we need to be good at writing prompts at this point? Because that's what I'm trying to teach students is, listen, you've got to do your research to know what you're asking for. And then AI can do it. So we all need to get better at search. Is that the right analogy I should be using, or is there a different?
It's a right analogy. It's not necessarily the right analogy, because
give me the right analogy.
Well, I don't know what the right analogy is, because the thing is that it's not this. One of the things I'll talk about is AI literacy, which is, in my opinion, a problem and very important issue to address. I like the analogy, and you're correct. You're absolutely correct. The problem is that this stuff is changing so fast, number one, and I'll give you an example. So fairly early on, prompt engineering, right, was a term probably most of us know, was and still kind of is really, really important. The only issue is that you've got AI who's an expert at prompt engineering, right? So they can literally help you create the proper prompts. So so my point is, this stuff changes so fast and is evolving so fast. Having AI literacy is not an event. It's an ongoing thing that from leadership on down, that I think we're going to have to think about and have a responsibility to our employees to upskill them on an ongoing basis. So again, I don't have the answer, but yes, to your point, to get less cutesy with my answer, the answer is yes, that's absolutely important. I'll give you an example. When you ask Chat GPT. I use chat only because I use that a lot. I use Claude, I use Bard, I use Gemini, I use Perplexity, which is I like one I advocate quite a bit. I'll talk about. But when you use, let's say, chat, and you say, hey, solve this math problem. It'll solve it and probably get it, I'd say 80 to 90% correct. When you tell it, you are a mathematics professor. You know a lot about differential equations. Solve these differential equation problems for me. It outperforms the regular non-persona prompt on the same exercise. So that kind of bolsters your point.
Yeah, prompt.
Yes,
Super important.
yes, prompting and personas are very important, as well as deconstructing the actual problem. So, for the scenario, go back to the writing the paper, right? You and I were writing the paper together. When you tell chat to write a paper on the topic that he and I chose, it'll do it. It may even do a pretty good job. It'll get a few things wrong, it'll make stuff up, right? Because it hallucinates. In fact, some of them, like Claude, for example, is a little bit friendlier, so it wants to please you. So sometimes it'll hallucinate because it kind of knows what you're looking for. But that notwithstanding, if I then told it to, and I deconstructed the problem, I said, first create the outline, then review it with this lens, with this persona, and look for these things, then give me a draft. Now send it to my colleague, incorporate my colleague's comments into the paper, write the final draft, then post it. The product is much better than when you straight up tell it to draft a paper. Does that make
This
sense?
is the better prompt. Yeah.
Because of the better prompt and the deconstructed prompt,
Workflow.
the workflow and the agency, yes. So let me share with you, again, this is not what could be. These are the data from B2B companies in terms of where you're seeing them applying AI the most in their organizations, okay? So you're seeing, and some of it kind of stands to reason, right? You're seeing, obviously, there's a lot of chatbots. Every single organization I know that I work with, I want a chatbot for this, I want a chatbot for that. Lots of chatbots. A lot of data, AI is good at certain things. It's good at what I call concision, taking a ton of data, making it more concise, and from with insights. So you can see that obviously the data analysis, sentiment analysis is very popular in terms of B2B companies. Predictive analytics, personalization, right? How do I communicate with this B2B customer? This is what they're like. Can I personalize my messaging based on where they are in a buying cycle, their preferences? And obviously content development. Now, you start looking at really, old industries that have been around for a while, they're building things, right? Selling things. You're also seeing it being employed. We talked about emissions. You talked about, absolutely. There's a company I work with called mCloud, startup, they partner with Google in their marketplace, but they basically work with these industrial companies and help them around operations and maintenance. Well, I talked about the wind management, being able to look at that wind turbine and see, for example, because of sensors, visual data about the wind turbine, predict when things are going to fail, preempt maintenance, change out blades perhaps that are going to fail. So that's saving the company a lot of money. So these are the kinds of things that are happening in very traditional organizations. Again, serving up visual data on a dashboard to some of the different users at the organization so they can see where there's fault tolerance. Can I save money because I can more readily send out a person to fix the blade, for example, or do maintenance on the blade? Let me give you another interesting one. It's a company called Praxis AI. They create digital twins of subject matter experts. One of the experts they started off with was in academia. They took a professor in biology. They took all the relevant content to that biology class. The book, all papers he's ever published, all videos he's ever done, class discussions that he's ever done, and created a miniature large language model. It's called a RAG, R-A-G. Basically, you can take OpenAI or ChatGPT or any of those large language models because they've been trained to have a natural language processing. Take that and then carve it out into a domain so that it's protected. So that it's not, this stuff's not going to the internet. It's walled off, and only the content that's given by the professor on that subject matter is the source of the data that it's using. And it's walled off, it's protected, they hosted by AWS, for example. So also all the security. So they're able, excuse me, to now create a digital twin of this subject matter expert, who's in this case a professor, so that students can have access to that professor 24/7. Right? Because you can't clone Ralph. Only time I can engage Ralph is if I'm in his class. Maybe he's kind enough to answer a text. But other than that, if I'm a student, I don't have a ton of opportunities to engage with him and have him answer questions. Now you're able to engage with Ralph's twin and ask questions. Now,
He would
Take-
never retire.
he would never retire, exactly.
Think
But think of the uses, think of, forget about, let's say, professors for a minute. Let's say you got 5 top sales guys who just kill it every year. What is it that these sales guys do that's different from your average sales guy? Do they communicate? Do they pitch better? Do they create better statements of work? So you can take that knowledge, and many organizations, especially larger organizations, have sales training. You can take that knowledge of sales training, the best statements of work, the best presentations, put it in this RAG, R-A-G, and have your large language model of your choice be able to pull from that source of data and provide insights. Hey, you've got a pitch to a particular client. Here's an example of a similar pitch that won, 90% of his deals. And if you could, for example, lift the floor of your sales force by 5%, what kind of impact would that mean to your top line? So these are the kinds of scenarios. And where it's interesting, is they're applying this use case to a few areas, especially areas that require a great amount of expertise and even certifications. So take nursing, for example, is one area they're applying it to. Accounting and tax and accounting and legal. Imagine if you can take the one partner who's an expert in M&A and disseminate some of his or her knowledge to the rest of the practice. What could that mean? Yes.
So, as I'm thinking about this, most of my exposure to use cases involving digital twins have been more related to processes, assets, not specific people.
Yeah.
And people grow. They learn new things. They go to ISBM member meetings. They come back with new learnings. How do you ensure that the input of data into an LLM is going to allow the LLM to continue growing and learning new
Because
things?
you're updating let's separate the things. They're using an LLM like OpenAI or Claude for its capabilities. What they're doing is creating a separate small language model, right? SLM or a RAG, where they take your data, whatever the source of data is, and it can be updated regularly. And that's the source of the knowledge for the LLM to pull on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so does that become that you need a role specific to managing that?
Exactly. So now you're getting to a really good point, right? Now you're starting to see what I need to think about in terms of the implication downstream, and perhaps how jobs may need to evolve over time. So maybe I'm not creating anymore from scratch the draft. Maybe we're co-authoring with AI, but you absolutely do need someone, a human in the loop, right, to update, make sure it's valid, accurate, timely, blah, 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 whatever that criteria is. So yes, those are some of the things we can think about, yeah.
How about we put this feed of this ISBM meeting into that model directly?
Yes.
Then you don't need that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's B2B stuff, sure, that could be one of your sources of data, right? That you're defining what the sources of truth are. You are defining it, not chat. You're just using chat's capabilities of natural language processing on your data.
You know, Amir, just a question. I think we're still in the early days of AI, but the early days of AI back in the 80s was expert systems. And what this sounds like is a liberated expert system on steroids. If you're really able to create a digital twin of a real expert, then it seems to me that, you know, one of the real audiences for this are non-experts faced with problems that they don't know how to solve. And that was the whole, you know, that was actually the whole raison d'etre of the expert systems. But they were very cumbersome and clunky, and you had to create, you know, the knowledge base. But here, you're using the term RAG. Is that short for something?
Yeah, retrieval augmented
Something.
generation. So
Okay.
it's similar to an LLM, but
I
it's
see.
smaller, it's contained, it's, you know, sources of data versus OpenAI or any of the other large language model have been trained on the entire internet, whatever's out there.
So in a RAG, you really can put high-end proprietary information about your
That
process.
is,
how
that
it
you
works.
trust. Yeah.
Sorry, Amir.
Yes.
On the RAG, we do it for customer insights. So, for example, in innovation, and we'll have done primary research, even over the course of years. You pull from the public domain if you want, and then the restricted proprietary customer insight, you put that in, so you feed the system.
Exactly.
So it doesn't flatline.
Exactly. And then again, I think the issue of privacy obviously is a concern. I don't want to minimize it, but let's get real for a minute, right? We've been using email for a long, long time. We send letters. Some of us probably still send letters to people in an envelope because we think it's secure, right? So let's not get freaked out about, right? There are ways to make things private and your own and proprietary and in your walls. It's not, and we've been doing it for years and years. Anybody uses any kind of cloud, I mean, if you're okay with cloud, what's the problem with AI, right? So I'm not saying blindly, I'm just saying there are ways around it. Okay, let's move on. This is just kind of summarizing in terms of where this twin concept is. Try to kind of put a picture together how the twin concept is being created, right? You can use whichever large language model you want. It's obviously on the trusted company data. It's data that you give it. It's got security and privacy. It's being hosted by somebody legit like AWS. And it can be this is where the power is. It can be connected and integrated with your CRM or whatever core technology that you're using for that particular process or activity. So this, again, I don't want to go through this laundry list, but this is what we're seeing in terms of marketing, B2B marketing. The areas of B2B marketing that are being AI is being used, and you can see it's pretty significant, pretty vast. So let's talk about some of the challenges. And this is where we're getting to the readiness. I've categorized the challenges as very similar to what we had with NetReady. Leadership challenges, governance, technology, and competencies. And I'll talk about each four of these. And in a breakout tomorrow, we're going to go a little deeper into these four. We're going to have an exercise around this, but I just want to introduce this concept. This is one of the things that I saw. Again, if I look at the data from these companies, B2B companies, 85% of them are experimenting with AI. There's no doubt. they're playing around with it, they have proof of concepts going on. However, if I ask what percentage of them have actually gone from proof of concept to scale at an enterprise level, it's a very small percentage. And part of the issue is the issue of value, lack of focus, right? Because we're experimenting with so many things that not every one of these things are things that matter. Right, so it's important. It sounds like motherhood and apple pie, but it's really important to think what truly matters to my organization or to my customers. And then also think about workflow. Can I embed it in existing workflow? Because the more you embed it in existing workflow, the easier it is to adopt. And then it's not all about technology, AI technology, which is really huge. You'll see it's literally about other things that you guys are very familiar with. It's about change management. It's about how do I upskill and continuously skill my people, right? How do I make them, everybody from leaders on down, literate with respect to AI, for example? Do my stakeholders, are they able to consume this AI innovation? That's a non-trivial issue. So those are the things we need to think about. Okay, so question back to AI literacy. Show of hands, how many of your organizations have what you would consider an AI literacy program for leadership as well as employees and even other stakeholders? How many have an existing and ongoing AI literacy program? Okay, a few. It's a very small percentage, and that definitely resonates with the data that I found. And this is why it's a problem. You can see the euphoria with respect to what AI's potential can be. That's the sentiment of leadership. Right, so 87% of leaders are engaging with AI and truly believe it can move the needle. However, less than 20% of them are actually helping themselves, their leadership, as well as their employees, upskill and become AI literate. That's a huge problem. I call it the wishful thinking gap. You can call it something else. I think there's a responsibility on leaders. If you believe that AI can change your organization, you have a responsibility to upskill and skill your employees.
Amir, do you recommend training in AI? Do you have a company or?
Yeah, look, there's a whole bunch. There's so many of them. There's certainly there's too many. But look, I'll come to the chase. I like LinkedIn, for example. LinkedIn Learning has some great classes that are free. Definitely, I encourage those. Coursera has plenty of them. Some are free, some are a little bit of money. That's another one. Many of the top business schools, if you're talking about kind of businesses and business school education, many of the top business schools have an AI certificate. Some are just as you go. Some are combination of hybrid combination where you do partly in person, partly virtual. But honestly, and frankly, I strongly encourage everybody, students, MBA student, undergrad, doesn't matter what it is. And frankly, I don't care what field it's in. I truly believe that every field will be AI enabled to some degree. Anything that's repetitive and mundane is going to be AI enabled. I absolutely guarantee it. So if you're a lawyer or a biologist or whatever it is, get your hands dirty with AI. If you don't have classes in AI, go to a professor who's remotely interested in your topic. It doesn't have to be an AI genius. Go to a professor who's interested in your field and say, I want to do an independent study on AI. I guarantee there's no professor who's worth what they get paid who's going to say no. Every professor, let me ask you an academic, which professor, anybody, show of hands, who's a professor here? Would you ever say no to a student who wants to do an independent study with you? I'm putting pressure on you.
That's a leading question.
On AI. If you do an independent study together on AI, XYZ, would you say no? Of course not, right? So there's so many avenues. That's also part of the problem. God, what do? I do like LinkedIn, Google, AWS, IBM, they all have free training and certification. Data Camp is another one. And I strongly encourage, even if you're an executive and don't know anything about coding, people think, oh my God, AI, I can't program. Take a Python class, very introduction to Python or introduction to R. I guarantee you'll enjoy it. And the more you can get your hands dirty with it, the more you can create, an algorithm, for example, that looks through data. It's really simple to do. They even give you synthesized data, made up data you can use and to pull in and put into the program. Get your hands dirty, because the more you touch it, the more you're going to understand, okay, wow, this is pretty cool. Now let's think about strategically, how do I make my enterprise AI enabled? What's the right way to do things? So I don't know if that answers your question. There's a plethora.
Yeah.
You can see this is also part of the problem that I have right now, which is, again, we're seeing lots of experimentation, but if you look at all these impact areas, you can see that besides cost reduction, that some of them have quantified cost reduction, everything is fluffy, right? It's important to translate fluff into metrics that matter. Now, not everything is going to be the end all and be all, but it's important to translate what's the so what, how do I know, what's the evidence, that's the value realization we talked about before. Right? I wrote about value realization back in the late 90s. And still today, I work with companies like Google, like Oracle, to translate their stuff into metrics that matter to executives. Because if you look at the marketing and positioning of how they pitch their products, it's great, it's nice, if they can even get the persona right, because a lot of times they're very technical and they're not speaking to, a CFO is going to care about certain things. But if you can translate the so what into a language that's going to resonate with the CFO or the CHRO, for example, then you've got some good stuff there. This again, kind of self-explanatory. These are some of the challenges that when we ask people, what is holding you back? Right, what is slowing you down with respect to AI and deploying AI? These are some of the challenges. You can see the different colors are different segmentations in terms of the size. But yeah, it makes a lot of sense, right? The hallucinations, number one. I got really right. I love ChatGPT, but half of the stuff is making up, it's bullshit, right? So, excuse my French. But you can see some of these are pretty. I think we're aware, obviously, the biases. So these are things we need to take into account and realize, and then need to put in guidelines and guardrails. And folks who are checking, is this accurate? Is this timely? Is this source correct? So Perplexity, I gave you an example. Perplexity, anybody used Perplexity before? Anybody else? Two people? I like Perplexity. Now, it's not super accurate, but the reason why I like it, and it's going after Google search big time. Big time. So what's interesting about, so think of ChatGPT, but what it gives you back is specific source of the data that it's giving you back. Now, the trick is that the sources, when you really test it, are not necessarily 100% accurate. Like if you go and like you go click on the article that it's sourced, okay, great, give me the article, and then I can't find the article.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you have to be a little bit careful, but it does give you the source of the data. So that's very interesting. But I think those are things that we can put guardrails in for, right? And there still needs to be that human in the loop, kind of validating the quality of the output, the trustworthiness of the output. Yeah.
So I've asked Gemini for sources before when I was doing some market research. And when I clicked on them, they were real things, but then, their interpretation was way off. is that what you're talking about here is the, where they're, so they'll actually produce that for me, but it has nothing to do with what it gave me in the decision.
Yeah, you can even ask chat. Chat will give you sources.
Yeah,
It's just that a certain percentage of them are complete nonsense.
yeah.
So either,
Is it, probably gonna be a dumb question I'll ask. Is it drawing its conclusions from somewhere else? Or did it just make those things up?
both. So part of it is, again, you have to understand, part of it is the generative part is the key thing there. It's generating, it's really, you're talking mathematical equations. So what it's doing is predicting the next likely word that's going to come based on the context you give it. So it's just predicting the statistics. The problem is some of these things have certain personalities. Like I said, Claude is a little friendlier, a little bit more in touch with emotions, for example, and likes to please. So yeah, sometimes it will make things up, it's very good at arguments. It's just that some of its arguments are supported by things that it's kind of making up that it kind of wishes it had. So that's why you need to be really thorough about the source of the data. So Perplexity is a little bit more accurate because it literally is tagging that specific piece of the source of the data and saying, here you go, click on it. This is where we got it from. You can go read it. It's not 100% accurate, but at least it's serving up the real source that it's getting its points from. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay. If you see that it's clicking to an inaccurate source or a made up source, it turns out to be, does that mean that what it said is made up?
No, not necessarily. That's what I'm saying. That's why it's important to really have some subject matter experts, fact checkers, and not only fact checkers, but like, hey, I'm producing some content for my customer, and we want to position it this way. Is this product not only trustworthy in terms of the sources of the data, the argument, but the logic, and also what is presenting to that persona? That's not going to happen from an AI by itself, and it's certainly not going to happen from someone who just graduated. That requires a little bit of nuanced expertise. Yeah.
So we've been having a lot of internal conversations in our firm about AI, and it's just especially since our younger people are highly predisposed, right? So here's an interesting question. If the AI is supposedly creating it, and now all of a sudden the human is fact checking the AI, what is the role now the human has come to serve in this dynamic? Because they're no longer at the front end of the conversation, they're now in service to the AI. So this is an interesting conversation we're having internally. And the second conversation we're having internally is for our young people, again, mostly, if they get in the habit of asking the AI to write something, eventually the AI just repeats itself over and over and over on the topic. So there's nothing new generated, right? Because it's gotten comfortable.
Wants to please you.
Comfortable with, oh, well, you liked that piece that I did 2 weeks ago. You're asking on something similar. Now I'm going to give you the same thing. So I think these are things you have to think about in the conversations you have internally, whatever role you're playing with a client or a customer or internal. I don't know. Does anybody else have experiencing those kinds of things? I'm just curious.
So you need to constantly put the AI down. That was terrible.
Roll up the newspaper.
You pick up on the just picking up on the phone is, how much of the internet, what percentage of the internet content is AI generated today?
Yeah.
And if it's 20%, and then that becomes the basis for future AI content generation. At some point, 90% of all the content is AI generated. So what are we doing?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. There's gonna be a lot. But remember, there are guardrails. We can take our own content that we trust, that's validated, that's updated, that's timely, blah, 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 whatever criteria you want, and put it into, what we want to leverage is its capabilities. It's pretty neat that it can synthesize all different voice of the customer from different channels and provide you insights. That's pretty interesting. So if you could provide it trustworthy, quality data, and that's easier said than done, right? Trustworthy and quality data, it's going to give you reasonably trustworthy insights. Now you do need to check, is this indeed, do I like this? Does this make sense? Do I see the flow? But is there transparency as to how it came to those conclusions? Those are some of the things, when you hear the term of responsible AI, those are some of the things that entails. It's not just the ethics, it's, is there trustworthy sources of where this is coming from? Right, does the logic make sense, for example? Is it timely? All this stuff, even, whether ChatGPT, all these large language models have learned on everything that's available online, which is a lot. So, YouTube stuff, and that's actually one of the interesting kind of side notes. That's why there's a little bit of a battle between, for example, Google, who owns YouTube, for example, and OpenAI, who owns ChatGPT, because ChatGPT was trained on YouTube content in part, which is owned by Google. So that's why there's an interesting lawsuit going on. Right, so anyway, it'll play itself out, but just to say, just to realize that, look, these large language models have interesting capabilities. Can I provide it with quality data that I trust and leverage its capabilities with my data? So,
I have a question.
yes, sir.
I'm an academic.
Yes.
I've never seen a real use case that the company's done.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example, perhaps one of the practitioners said?
Yeah, I have a good one. I have a
Give
good
me
one,
one.
Copilot that we're rolling out. So in like business leadership, often we're confronted with problems the organization hasn't been able to solve. So that comes to me in like this email string of 20 emails. And Copilot can now summarize. Instead of me have to go through, oh my God, it was the 13th email 4 weeks ago that's actually what they're asking, which might take me an hour after a long day here. I can hit Copilot and we'll summarize. This is what's being asked. This is what we recommend.
And you know what a practical, to piggyback off of that use case, what we could have done, sorry about this, what we could have done is use, for example, Read AI, integrated it into Zoom, have it, give it the recording and the transcript, and it would do what he exactly just said, which is summarize the key points and then come up with, hey, here's what I would send out to the attendees as a summary, key points, lessons learned, blah, blah, blah. That could be a real example.
Could I ask a follow-up question? Have you found in your experience that it picks up certain things and certain other things kind of get?
We're in beta testing right now, so I don't have a good answer for that. I don't have enough iterations to say.
I see.
Where it's built.
So we're using fireflies.ai for our weekly meeting. And not everyone can go to it, right? So you get a summary, and I've gone to the meeting and then read the summary, and it's, it's quirky, right? It picks up every time someone says vacation. I don't know why.
We're
It's got like a
starting.
paragraph on someone's vacation, but I know, I was on the meeting, they only talked to you about 2 sentences. It was great, it was sunny, I had a bad night coming back.
We're saying board members and for board meetings use it for board members. So we're definitely seeing a lot of interesting use cases. Quick, so here's a framework I want to put on. Yes.
I just have one quick comment.
Yes, sir.
So Copilot has the same, summarize everything, but it doesn't pick up accents. So I have a Spanish accent or people from somewhere else, it just doesn't pick up. So summarize it just doesn't make much sense. So.
Yeah,
if
you
use it,
definitely have, there's
That's
translate, I'm not saying this is perfect because, but you definitely have translation, AI translation that you can incorporate. There's even nuanced ones where there's localization. So let's say you want, Catalan Spanish versus South American Spanish or Mexican Spanish, for example. There are AI that are more localized and can help with that. Not the end all and be all, certainly, but definitely that's an area that's ripe and very, very active with AI right now, just localization and translation.
But I wasn't even talking about translation. It's
Yeah.
between like this conversation right here. Probably some words I'm saying it wrong, it won't pick up those things because it just doesn't get those mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm sure it will be fixed somehow.
Yeah, over time, absolutely. So I'll introduce a framework, again, something that's a good exercise for you guys to do in your organization. So I'm not gonna go into the history of these 2 axes, but I'm just gonna say that if you take these 2 axes, how new or innovative is this particular initiative to my industry, not company, to my industry, and how business critical is it in terms of differentiation to my organization? If you take those 2 axes, and you map it on a grid, on a graph, the area under the curve is the value, a surrogate measure for value of your company, market cap if you're a public company. Okay? So these two axes are the framework, the axes that I use to map your AI investments, Oliver, and it create a very simple lexicon, investment lexicon. Okay, so the bottom left is run the business, keep the lights on type stuff, improve the business, margin improvement, grow the business, and innovate the business. And there's some nuances, but it's a very interesting exercise. Take your AI investments that you have today, map them onto this grid, and see what your portfolio, because everybody has a portfolio, just like your investment portfolio has one. These are some of the characteristics. But this is more interesting. This is what we found. When we work with companies and we map their AI investments onto this grid, this is what your average company looks like. And the question is, not that this is bad or good, the question is this the kind of portfolio that you want? If not, why not? And then I kind of created a sort of a set of deployment profiles, what companies out there look like in terms of their use and deployment of AI. We've got what I call decorators. They're just slapping AI like lipstick on a bulldog, right? And not to say that decorating is a bad thing. There's productivity improvements to be had there. So it's a good thing. It's just that only decorating is not going to get you competitive advantage, right? You've got what I call remodelers, re-engineering a process using AI. Builders, when you're taking a new AI, creating a new product or service offering. Architect is where you're integrating some of that workflow from soup to nuts using AI enablement. And then what I call a syndicator. That mCloud scenario, for example, where they are taking companies who are dealing with emission management and using Google and mCloud as the platform, and they can provide dashboards to these companies. That is and there's an ecosystem of potentially even competitors in that space who are using AI services for reduced emissions, for example. That is a syndicator type of role. So the question is, can I play some of these different roles? And what would that mean? Right. So I'll stop there. Enough frameworks, and just again, thanks everybody I thought it was great questions, and thanks everybody for their time. And we have a couple more minutes, or are we good?
Yes, we have a half an hour break, so.
Okay, if anybody's got any more questions, yeah.
I have something that might be somewhat of a back to basics question.
Yeah.
I find that in conversations, just generally about AI, that oftentimes we're conflating that to mean the large language models. It's what kind of the darling of the AI world is what we're most talking about. Yep. It's what probably most people have been exposed to. Are there other just basic classifications of types of AI other than the LLMs?
Absolutely, absolutely. I gave an example. Before chat we even sniffed chat, right? Back in November of 22. We were interacting with AI regularly, right? How many have brought something on Amazon? Amazon has been using AI for decades. Netflix for decades, right? So things like machine learning, deep learning, predictive learning, those things have been around for a long, long time and are very frequently used. It's the reason why it's so sexy by Gen AI or generative AI is because we got to touch it. The regular Joe got to touch it. And we're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But yeah, so there definitely are different classifications. And some of them require some serious data analytics and scientist capabilities. Some of them, you can get those services from the cloud and borrow them and buy them. So there's lots of decisions as a leader you need to make. Do I build this stuff in-house? Do I need to hire a bunch of data scientists? Maybe, maybe not. Can I borrow the data scientist? Maybe. Right, so that doesn't answer your question. So absolutely, there are different categorizations of what these things do. Generative AI obviously is the most talked about and everybody's super excited about, just because it's just everybody's got to touch it.
Yeah, Amir?
Yeah.
Just a question. This stuff is, and I can't help but remember Net Ready.
Yeah.
And going through this, and the question that comes to my mind is, have you seen any companies that have actually decided we need to create a department, an organizational element that really takes an orthogonal look at this on an ongoing basis and informs us. We can't delegate this to them. All of us need to learn about it, but when you go back into the web, we all started playing with the web, but there was someone
Yeah.
who was really sweating it 24/7. And in fact, I know at TI, it was one of our senior principal fellows who took the lead. That was kind of the highest thing on the technical ladder you could be. So he was a really well-respected scientist, but his job was just constantly scanning. What's changing on, and it was, of course, this a lot of years ago, so what's changing here? What's new? What must we keep on our radar? And again, all of us playing with it, and all of us learning about it is fine. But are we at the point in this where you need a center of excellence inside the firm to
Yes.
enable you to not get hit by the next thing that comes along?
Absolutely. Now, whether you organize it as a center of excellence or you have an AI, chief AI officer, there's different ways to do it. But the answer is yes.
Is anyone doing that?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Many companies are having a centralized piece and saying, for example, here, I don't want to get into nuance, but take, for example, the question, how do I finance AI investments in my organization? Do I let every single, because this happens, right? Do I let every single function out of the discretionary capital fund AI? Well, maybe not, right? Do I need to say, you know what, this layer of the stack, I'm gonna fund as an SG&A, corporate line item. Anything above the stack has to come from the business units of the function. That's another way, right? Do I have a federated model, a centralized model? So these are absolutely legitimate questions, but yes, you need somebody, you need a leadership engagement. This is not something that can be delegated. This needs to be a CEO agenda item. Now that they're the center of excellence, they need to be able to answer questions around value and risk, right? That's number one. You need a centralized, team that says, here's how we're going to do AI. For this kind of stuff, this is how you do it. These are the guardrails. For this stuff, have at it. You need a centralized team of sorts. So those are some of the issues that I work with companies on. Like, okay, well, what should a center of excellence do? What should a charter be? What should its guiding principles be? How do we create an ongoing AI literacy program for everybody, not just the AI czar or the top technologist in the company? These are non-trivial issues. Absolutely, yeah.
We're getting a little bit away from marketing, right, the marketing part of it, but it is an important conversation. You think back to where we were when we were talking about data security, a decade or so, or even 2 decades ago, has now become a board level issue. Marketing has the opportunity to help leverage this as a strategy that AI is going to become a board level issue.
Absolutely.
So we can get at the front end of that conversation and strategically, right? Because it has used.
That's a great point. I can't emphasize, I won't re-emphasize that. I mean, listen, the good thing, so everybody is crazy, we gotta figure this, we gotta be thoughtful about it. But marketing absolutely is the leader. If you ask me what function across the entire organization, obviously every industry is a little bit different. Marketing right now is by far the most aggressive function in the organization as far as using AI. So you've got an opportunity to leverage your discussion at the board level, right? So anyway, thank you guys very much. Last question, comment? Yeah.
So I have a question when it comes to copyright and originality of works. So like going from your original instance and going back and forth with someone with a paper. If ChatGPT is owned by Google, Google technically is part of your project and you would have to sign it, so use that as a citation. What is the percentage of when they don't have it? You have to look at the revision of that original work.
So ChatGPT is owned by OpenAI, which is in essence Microsoft, right? So they're really, you're talking about a few key players here, right? Same similar players. Although Perplexity is going after Google search, OpenAI, essentially you can consider Microsoft, okay? It's called open. but it's not so open. But, and then you've got a Meta, right? Facebook, Meta, that's another big player. You've got AWS, that's another big player, right? IBM, so you've got a few major players who are basically trying to, it's a land grab right now. I think the LLM space is going to become a commodity. They do fairly similar things. They're going to get more and more accurate, do cooler things. But to the copyright question, I don't know the answer to that. Okay, those are things that are being worked out and will be worked out in the court as we speak, because it's a very, very serious question. Absolutely is. I don't want to minimize or marginalize your question because it's a huge issue. Anyway, guys, thank you so much.